Today's daf we're going to be learning is Nedarim daf Pevav. Today's daf is sponsored by Sharon Mink in honor of the 40th anniversary of their Aliyah. Okay, a few short announcements. First of all, I want to thank Rabbanit for finishing. Last night was the last of a 4-part series about accidental murderer in Hebrew, which was a skills class geared toward teaching people how to learn Gemara. And it's the third series we've done. So far, we've done one a year. And we're going to be starting in a few weeks the skills class in English. So that's going to begin on February 5th. It's going to be on Sundays in the month of February. 4 classes, I'll be teaching it. So the registration is going to go out soon, and you can all register. The course is for women specifically, but all the resources will be after the Zoom class. It'll be digital. Everyone can access it. And I want to invite you all to the course, and we do Zoom breakout rooms, chavrutot, with design sheets. If anybody wants to prepare, you can already start. There's 2 other courses already online on our course website. You can find it by the tab of courses, and everything is free. You can join the courses and do them as preparation, because it's still, each course is really geared to beginners, but there's a certain amount of building on the previous ones. You can also do the previous ones after the course if you like it. In the month of March, we'll be having Rabbanit Sarna is going to do beginner's course part 2, which is more of a lecture series about background in Gemara. There's 2 different ways to get to learn Gemara. The real way to do it is to actually sit and learn, and that's what the skills class is. But to fill in the gaps, which we know many people are missing, even people who've been learning Gemara for many years are missing some of those basics of Gemara. So we do a combination of those 2 courses to help every year get you up to another level. So those are some exciting things going on. Also, yesterday we have a new page on the site called What is a Siyum? And you can all use it. We create the new Siyum with different details about what is a Siyum, how do you do a Siyum if you want to know how to, what's the meaning of all the words we say at the Siyum. So you can find it also on our site, and through there you can even register for the Siyum, which is coming up soon. As I've mentioned a few times already, there's different Siyums around Israel. There's different Siyums going on in America. If you're in a group where they haven't yet talked about a Siyum, you can suggest it, and maybe a bunch of you can get together to celebrate. Always important to celebrate milestones, and especially in learning and something you spend time every day doing. It's exciting to feel like we finished something and moving on to the next. Always reminds me of this story. I was once sitting preparing for teaching outside some area where my daughter was in a gym class, and I was near the end of one of the volumes. So this little kid says to me, "You finishing that book?" And I kind of laughed, because the kind of thing maybe you finish it, but right, number one, you always come back to it, and also there's another one to come. So it's also a good opportunity to encourage new women to join. So we're also coming out with we'll be sending around an image for Nazir to get people to start joining. If you want to pass that around to friends, it's also another thing going on. Okay, now we're moving on to learn, which is what we need to do every day. Okay, I have to go back to something we did yesterday. So something I didn't explain properly, and I'll go back to the beginning, and then I looked at the daf after, and I said, oh, wait, I didn't understand that properly. So I'm going to fix it right now, and then we'll move on. Anyway, it's a good intro to what we're going to do today. We started with our Mishnah, and in our Mishnah, there was this case where there was a 3-way debate. The woman says, what I produce is going to be forbidden to her husband. According to one opinion, she can't do that at all, because anything she produces goes straight to her husband. So she has no rights to do that, okay? Because that's part of their agreement, and therefore she can't just say they're not yours. Rabbi Akiva says, well, he shouldn't nullify it, because while it's true, all of what she produces, it's not really all of what she produces, it's the basics. Anything she produces above a certain level can actually be hers. So the vow can actually apply to the ha'adafas. It's called the extra. Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri says she can actually nullify not for the reason of Rabbi Akiva, but for a different reason. What if he divorces her? So if he were to divorce her, then he would never be able to remarry her, because as soon as the divorce would kick in, the vow would kick in, and then he wouldn't be allowed to benefit from her, and then that would preclude him from being able to marry her. To which Shmuel said, we hold like Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri, this last opinion, to which the Gemara said, how could Shmuel say that? Isn't that like someone who sanctifies, because sanctification and vows right now we're assuming are one and the same. And one cannot sanctify something that's not in existence in this world. So how could, and Shmuel holds that, which we're going to see in a minute where, and that's where I didn't explain it well enough. But in our Mishnah, it seems like Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri is saying, and Shmuel holds that way, that she can forbid something that's not even in this world yet. Number one, she's not divorced yet. Number two, she can't even initiate divorce if she wanted to. And who knows if they'll ever get divorced, right? Now, most married couples don't necessarily get divorced. So how could that be? So now, how did they get to the fact that Shmuel holds that you can't sanctify something that's not in existence? So that's at the bottom of Pehamid Aleph, and this I'm going to reread and explain properly. If somebody sanctifies his wife's maaseh yadayim, what she produces, it's irrelevant because they're not his to do. Now, what do you mean they're not his? They are his. We just said they're his. Well, either you have to understand this is according to Rav Huna, who says a woman can say if she wants, we talked about this yesterday, I generally give my husband my maaseh yadayim according to this halacha, right? And I get them in return, I get food. But what if I say, I want to keep my salary and you keep your food? I'll support myself. She can do that. So this would be a case where she basically says, don't sanctify my maaseh yadayim, I'm going to keep them for myself, right? Any nizona be'eni osa, I'm not going to give you what I made. And then they're not his to do. Or it's a case where he, for whatever reason, isn't supporting her. And then automatically, right? Some people disagree with Rav Huna and say she doesn't have the rights to do it. But if he wouldn't support her, then she gets her maaseh yadayim. So that's the first part. The motar, this I didn't explain properly. The motar is, in a regular case even, normally he gets her maaseh yadayim, but he only gets X amount. The motar, extra, that's like we talked about the hadafa in the Mishnah, goes to her. Now, if he sanctifies this, so now there's a machloket. Now, what's the machloket? Now, this is what I forgot, I neglected to notice yesterday. This isn't his to sanctify at all. It's hers 100%. So how could there be this debate that Rabbi Meir says it's hektish, Rabbi Yochanan says it's chulin? So the important part to know here, and how is this davar shelo ba'al olam? Because what we're talking about here is whatever she makes above X amount goes to her. However, when she dies, if she predeceases him, and this is the davar shelo ba'al olam, in the event in the future that she were to die before him, he inherits the motar. So when she takes a vow on the motar, when he sanctifies the motar, okay, which is what this bright is talking about, is it his to sanctify? It's certainly not his now. It's hers 100%. But in the future, it might be his if she predeceases him. So that's the davar shelo ba'al olam, and that's where Rabbi Meir says he can, because it'll eventually, or might potentially eventually be his. And Rabbi Meir doesn't seem to have an issue with makdish davar shelo ba'al olam. But Rabbi Yochanan says it's chulin. It's irrelevant what he does. Because it's irrelevant, why is it irrelevant? Because it's davar shelo ba'al olam. And that's where we see that Shmuel says you can't sanctify something shelo ba'al olam. So sorry that I didn't explain that properly yesterday, but at least today we corrected it. Now, then we had our answer that we rejected immediately, which is maybe he didn't really mean fully I hold like Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri, maybe just he disagrees about the hadafa, Rabbi Akiva. Then we said, it should have said then I don't hold like Rabbi Akiva, or he could have said I hold like Tanakama, or I should have said I hold like Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri. Sorry, I think I confused the two names a minute ago. But Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri just in this area. Then we had option number 2, which is Rabbi Yosef, who wanted to distinguish between hekdesh and neder, but then we rejected that. And then we have Rav Huna b'reid Rabbi Yehoshua. So we're going to start with him. El Amar Rav Huna b'reid Rabbi Yehoshua, 5 lines from the bottom of Peheh Amabet. Be'omeret yikatshu yadai la'osehem. It's not going to be a case of davar shelo ba'al olam, because she said not whatever I produce. She said what's forbidden to you is my hands and what they produce. Because she includes my hands are in this world. Sounds okay, but the Gemara says, but what do you mean? First of all, her hands, what she produces, the thing that comes from her hand, are already the husband's property. So again, she can't. So they say, well, it's when she says, what she's saying is my hands that are in this world, in the event that you divorce me, this will be applicable. To which the Gemara goes back to square one and says, that doesn't resolve anything for us, because now she's not divorced, and who knows if she'll get divorced. So even though she's talking about her hands, which are in this world, it's her hands in this world in a situation which is not yet in this world, and who knows if it will be in this world. So how on earth does this work? And we're back to, even though he answered this by saying she's referring more to her hands, which are in this world, still is referring to what her hands will produce at some future point. It's no different than we started with our question, which is, this is davar shelo ba'al olam. It's not in existence. To which we're going to start now. It's a little bit confusing what's going to happen here, but I'll tell you the structure and it'll make it a lot easier. We're going to start with Rabbi Ila, who's going to compare it to another situation where we're going to see that some future, you can sanctify something that will potentially happen in the future and say, this is like that. To which Rabbi Yehoshua is going to come and say, what are you talking about? It's not similar to that. It's more similar to something else, which doesn't work at all. And then someone's going to say, Rabbi Yehoshua, it's not like that. It's more like this, and this works. And then they're going to say, oh, it's not like that. It's more like this, and this works. And no, it's not like that. It's more like this, and this works. So other than Rabbi Yehoshua, they're all going to correct it to a situation which they think is going to answer the question. So they're going to keep making comparisons. The Rabbi Yehoshua is the only one who, in his comparison, basically says it's more similar to this, which would never work. Everyone else is going to keep suggesting a better comparison that will work and that will prove the answer. In the end, every single of those is going to be rejected, and Rav Ashi is going to have to come up with a totally different solution. So that's the structure, which is going to get us to the next Mishnah, which is already very simple, and we're going to learn the Mishnah with one little question, and that's going to be our daf. So Amar Rabbi Ila. And by the way, this is a sugi we saw in Ketubot already. I didn't look to see if it's the entire thing is the same, but parts of this are definitely we have learned before. Amar Rabbi Ila. If I said to you, this field that I'm going to sell to you, okay, right now the field's in my possession, and I say, I'm selling this field to you. If at some future point I buy it back from you, tikadesh, it will be sanctified. So basically in the middle of making the sale to you of my property, and I say, I don't know why I would say this. Maybe I'm trying to say I'm never going to take this back because in the event that I would buy it back, it's going to be sanctified, but I don't know why I would say this. Maybe that's a reason. But for whatever reason, this is really a theoretical case. If I were to say to you as I'm selling it, if I buy it back, it will be sanctified. Milo kadsha, does that not work? Meaning that works. And that's very similar. In other words, what's happening here? I'm standing today and I'm sanctifying something at some future potential situation that may or may not happen, just like the divorce. She may or may not get divorced. And she's talking about, again, we're comparing as if sanctity and vows are one and the same. That's the assumption here. So would this not work as in our case as well? Matkifla Rabbi Yehoshua. Rabbi Yehoshua says, what kind of comparison is this? Midame. These are not similar. Sadezo shani mocher lecha hashta biyadehi. When I stand up and I'm selling you this property and I say, right now I'm selling it to you, and in the event that I buy it back from you, it will be sanctified. That will work, but that's because right now, it's true that in another 5 minutes, it won't be in my possession. But right now, when I say those words, it's mine. That's not the same as the woman. The woman, her maaseh yadayim right now are not hers to say anything to. I could say about some future point because right now I am the sole owner. So therefore, he says, right, hashta biyadehi, this property is in my hands right now to say, when I buy it back from you, if I buy it back from you, it will be sanctified. So I can sanctify it right now. Therefore, I can sanctify it based on some future point. But but a woman, it's not in her right to sanctify her maaseh yadayim. Again, that's what we said. Right now, she doesn't have rights to it. The husband has a lien on it. It's his. So to which Rabbi Yehoshua says, you want to make a comparison. And as I told you before, he's going to compare it to something that doesn't work. Okay, so now, yes, we're talking about her earnings, not her hands, actually. Okay, just let's be very clear. What she's talking about is what I create with my hands. Okay, but her hands are in this world, and what she could create is in this world. What's the problem? It's owned by her husband, though. Anything she produces is owned by the husband. Although we're going to see that it's not really fully owned by him, and that's soon where we're going. So each stage you're going to have questions because they're going to have questions as well. In other words, these comparisons aren't perfect. Okay, this more similar, Rabbi Yehoshua says, to the following. This field that I'm selling to you, No, this field that I sold to you already. That's what he says. It's more similar to a time when I have no ownership on the field. So if after I made the sale, and now you're the sole owner, and I come over to you and I say, listen, this field that I sold you yesterday or a year ago, or whenever it was, if in the event that I buy it from you, it will be sanctified. Mikadsha, Rabbi Yehoshua says, no one would ever think that I can sanctify that because so what that I was an owner at some point, I don't own it now. So therefore, that's the woman. Yes, her Maaseh Yadayim were hers to begin with, but as soon as she got married, they were no longer hers. So she has no rights at this point to say at some future point when they will be mine, I'm going to sanctify, or in this case, forbid them to you. She can't do that. So Rabbi Yirmiyah basically says you're going to make a comparison. This is the correct comparison, and this shows totally against what you said. And basically, we're back to square one with Shmuel's question, which is, how could Shmuel hold like Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri and say that this works when he really doesn't think that one can sanctify something that is not in one's possession right now? So, Matkifla Rav Papa comes Rav Papa and says, and now from here on in, everyone's going to try a better comparison, and each comparison that they make is going to be, and therefore it should work. But every time the comparison will be rejected because they'll say this isn't really similar enough. Matkifla Rav Papa, midani. How is this similar? Is this similar? No. Why do I not agree with your comparison to what Rabbi Yirmiyah said, which is you no longer own it, and you say, if I buy it back, it will be sanctified, which won't work. Why is it not like that? Because when I sell it to you, it's 100% yours and it's 0% mine. That's not the same with the woman in her Maaseh Yadayim. The woman actually owns, first of all, she owns her hands, as you said before, Becky, right? Her hands are her own. Even her Maaseh Yadayim are hers. What's the issue? He can gain from the proceeds, right? It's like we talked about women's property. When she comes into marriage, she comes in with property. The property, the goof, the principle of it is hers. It's that he gets all the proceeds. So that's the way we view this Maaseh Yadayim. It's not like she's not an owner at all. With the sale, I don't own it anymore. I sold it to you. It's yours. I can't come claim partial ownership or something. But the woman actually owns the principle of this. She just gives him the proceeds of what she makes. So first of all, it's her own body we're talking about. It's her item. And yes, the proceeds go to her husband, but it's really her own. So therefore, he says, I'm going to give you a comparison that it's more similar to, where the goof is owned by the original owner, the proceeds are owned by someone else, and it works to sanctify. And therefore, that's going to answer our question. If I give you land for collateral, I took out a loan, and how do I pay it back? So first of all, often I'll give you my land. You can eat the proceeds of my land, but the land goes back to me when I pay back the loan, right? And then maybe we deduct whatever you took from it from what I owe you. But so this field that I gave to you as collateral, when I redeem it, it will be sanctified. So what do we see here? What are we saying? We're saying that at some future point, right, because I own the principle, and I can then say, when I redeem it, it will be sanctified. Milokadja, does that not work? I mean, that should work. So therefore, it's no different from our woman here. She basically has rights to the principle. And therefore, what she's saying is at some future point, when you divorce me, I will sanctify it. Right? Again, not sanctify, but I will forbid it to you. So that should work. But Matkif Rav Shisha Berid Rav Idi, again, somebody comes and says, no, this doesn't work. Midani. Sadeh bi'ado lifdot. Isha bi'adali itkaresh. There's a huge difference here. If I give you my field as collateral because I took out a loan, the second I have the money to pay back the loan, I pay back the loan and done, right? That's in my control. That's why I can sanctify it. Davar shelo ba'al olam. It has to be something that's, as we call beheseg yad. I can easily access it. I can do this. It's in my control. Maybe I don't have money, but as soon as I get money, I can get it back. But the woman, as we know, unfortunately, women can't decide to get divorced. The husband has to initiate the divorce. He has to give the get. It's not in her control. If he doesn't want to give the get, that's why we have aguna problems, right? If the husband doesn't want to give a get, the woman's stuck. So she can't talk about some future situation that, number one, is a future situation. Number two, it's not even clear it's going to happen. Number three, right? Or I would say really two things. Number one, it's not clear it's going to happen. Number two, it's not in her control. So how can she make a vow about something like that? Just, if I could do it with my collateral, it's not the same here, because my collateral, I can decide when I want to pay back the loan. I can pay it back at any time. To which Rav Ashi Rav Idi says, but if you want to compare to a collateral, I'll give you a case. Halo damya ela lo omer lechavero sadezer shemashkanti lecha le'eser shanim lechishavdenu mimcha tikadesh. Milo kacha, would that not work? Okay, what's the case? I gave you the money. I'm sorry, you gave me the money. I gave you my land as collateral. But the deal was the loan was for 10 years. And what do I say to you? I say, or maybe even the loan wasn't for 10 years, but I say to you the following. I say, this field that I gave you as collateral for 10 years, we put a time frame on it, which means what? Why is this more similar? Because right now I can't redeem it. I say, this land I gave you for 10 years, or whatever the collateral is, after 10 years, when I redeem it, it will be sanctified. Now, according to Rav Ashi Rav Idi, this should work because I own the principal. So what if I can't access it now? That's not relevant. So likewise, the woman, she can't access it now, but at some future point, okay, now this is the problem, but right now, at some future point, let's say, right, like 10 years, in a certain period of time, if he divorces her, it will be hers. So just like the collateral works, even though I can't return the money today and get my collateral back because I gave it to you for 10 years, I can't access it now, and yet I can sanctify it at some future point. That should work for the woman as well. You can imagine where the Gemara is going to go with this. Matkipla Rav Ashi, and we finally get to the last one. I told you he's going to have the last word. First of all, it's usually chronological. The Shiur are organized chronologically. He's the last one. He's the one who finished, right, sealed the Gemara, although people came after him and added things that got added in, but that's the stama. That's not with names. Anyway, Matkipla Rav Ashi midame. That's not similar. Hatam kitz ishami lekitzuta. There was an end date. We knew that in 10 years it would be mine, right? Or at least assuming I redeem it. But we assume I will redeem it in 10 years and it will be mine. First of all, often the 10-year proceeds are enough to basically pay back the loan. So even if I don't end up with cash on hand, the 10 years you've used my field will be enough to get back the loan, and therefore it'll just become mine. So I can then sanctify it. But the woman, again, has no power over her ability to divorce or not. And therefore, there's no end date. There's no clarity that, oh, one day this will be yours. And therefore, this whole comparison doesn't work. And basically, we're stuck back where we started, which is, how can Shmuel say, even if we take Rav Huna, braid Rabbi Yehoshua, the son of Rabbi Yehoshua, he's different from the regular Rav Huna. But even if we take Rav Huna, the son of Rabbi Yehoshua, who says this is specifically when she's talking about her hands, and again, we talked about yesterday, even if she doesn't say that, that's really what she means, and her hands are in this world, but she's still talking about some future point, which is, number one, not necessarily going to happen, number two, not in her control at all. And that would make it davar shelo ba'al olam, and that would preclude it from being compared to any of these cases that we tried to compare it to, other than the one that Rav Yirmiyah said, which didn't work. So anyway, even that one we rejected. Okay, so Ella Amar Rav Ashi. So now it starts with Ella because he's got to go in a different direction, right? So he basically says we're going to start over and figure out a different reason. So we're now at the top of Amud Bet. Ella Amar Rav Ashi, Shane Konamot. We were making, right now we're going to say Konamot are different, not different from Hekdesh, just different than all these cases of the fields that we kept bringing. What's the difference here, or in general? Okay, Shane Konamot dechi kedusha haguf dame. It's like kedusha haguf. It's like sanctifying something. Okay, now this is what we were comparing it to all until this point. But what he's going to add here is very important. Something we've actually seen a few times. Uchi de Rava, and as Rava says, de Amar Rava, hekdesh chametz v'shichrol mafki'im miyadei shiabud. Rava says the following. Okay, this is a bit of a hard thing to go through, but we're going to go through it pretty clearly. If I give you something to pay back for a loan, okay, I lien my property to you, I lien my my slave to you. I lien my food to you. I say, take it from, my bakery or something. And then, so I have something in my possession. This is exactly like the woman, her maaseh yadayim or her possession, but it's lien to somebody else. It's lien to the husband, right? He has access. He can take it, right? It's his. So if now we're going to go through three things that basically override the shibud. It basically overrides the lien. Okay, shibud is a lien. So hekdesh, if I take something that I said, if in the event that I don't pay you back this loan, you can take my watch. And then I sanctify my watch to the Beit HaMikdash. Okay, I sanctify it to the temple. That's what we call mafki'in miyadei shiabud. That trumps the lien, which means it's no longer lien to you. If I sanctify it, according to Rava, that overrides the lien and you can't take it from me anymore. Chametz, let's say you're not Jewish, and I give you chametz, and I say this chametz, okay, this bread is going to be lien to you in the event I don't pay you back. And then Pesach kicks in. Now, what happens on Pesach? That chametz becomes chametz shavar alav Pesach. That becomes chametz. It was in my possession when it was Pesach, and it's become forbidden for me to benefit from. That means that it's no longer lien to you because I can't benefit now by me returning it to you, right? You taking it from me, that would be benefiting me. So therefore, it becomes forbidden, okay? Forbidden for him to collect. That removes the lien from, because it's forbidden to me to benefit from, it removes the lien from the property, from the food, okay? From the bread. If I gave you a slave to pay back for a loan, and I said, in the event I don't pay back the loan, here's my slave, my Canaanite slave, then I free the slave. That also removes the lien. So these three things remove lien. So what does Rav Ashi come and say? Very simply, when the woman forbids the husband to her maaseh yadayim, she basically, that overrides and removes the shibud, because neder is like hekdesh, and since hekdesh removes a lien, also her vow removes the lien. That makes, okay, it doesn't make perfect sense, but because it's hard to understand this concept, how this works. But assuming we take Rava at face value, that would work. What's the problem? There's a big problem with this answer. That sounds like what? It sounds like as soon as I take a vow that anything I produce is not going to my husband, according to Rava, the vow would kick in immediately. It would work to remove my husband's lien on my stuff. What's the problem with that? What did Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri say? Let's go back to his words, right? He says, we're back to Hey Hamad Aleph, Yafel, he should nullify the vow. Now, according to our explanation, why should he nullify the vow? Because it's not his anymore. And therefore, it's now going to be forbidden to him. So he better nullify it so it won't be forbidden to him. Shema Yigarshena, he says, though, in case he divorces her. So the Gemara says, then it doesn't have to be Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri should say Yafel, because the vow applies immediately, not in case he divorces her. So next line in the Gemara is very complicated to understand, and there's many. And when I say complicated, I can explain in a way that's simple to understand, but complicated in the sense that, first of all, there's different versions of what it says here. There's different ways of how to understand it. I'm going to go with the Ran's explanation. Tane ve'od shema yigarshin. Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri is adding an added reason. Okay, again, we're going to see what this means exactly by added. The Ran is going to explain. Okay, I'll read it a little bit in the Ran together because we have some time today. V'od shema yigarshena ka'amal. Mehashta nami kaddish. From now, it's already kadosh. Dekona mafkia shiabude de baal. Okay, so now, that's what we said. That's part of the question. But now he says, but if you are to say, now that's also part of the different girsa. Some people say it's if you're going to say, and some people say it actually is the case. But either which way, he's going to say, but if you want to come and tell me, now what did we say? My possession, anything I create, okay, now we're not talking about my possessions, but my maaseh yadayim are lien to my husband. A minute ago, we just said that if I vow, though, or make them hekdesh, whatever it would be, it would remove the shibud of the husband. But they say, if the Ran says, if you want to claim, though, that what? Rabbanan l'shiabude de baal be'odat tachtav. But the rabbi said, and we talked about this in Ketubot, if we allowed that, what would happen? It would create problems in the house. because the husband's feeding his wife, and then she says, oh, my maaseh adayim are forbidden to you, or hekdesh. And the husband's like, what do you mean? They were mine. So she'll say, well, I have the rights. I can be mafkia midei shibud. I can override but it's not a good relationship between them, right? And they're living together. So if you want to say, or some people say, we do say this, okay, everyone says this. So again, two ways reading it, that almua means they made it stronger. The rabbis strengthened the shibud of the husband. A shibud of a husband is not like a regular shibud of a loan. Okay? Why? Be'odat tachtav, when they're still living together. As long as they're living together, he has a stronger lien on her property. It's as if he's a full buyer. So what does that mean? That means that while they're married, he's a buyer. But what's the problem? If he's a buyer, then how does this kick in later when he divorces her? In other words, it's got to be one or the other, right? Either she can be mafkia the shibud because it's just a shibud. Once you say he's a buyer, well, then we have a different problem, right? So the Gemara is answering and saying, well, even though theoretically the shibud, she could get rid of the shibud by taking a vow, in the end, the rabbi strengthened his position. Again, whether you take this as definite or if you want to say the rabbi strengthened him and it doesn't work, then I'll give you another answer, okay? And then you have to say Shema Yigashena. What's the problem? The Ran says later, I'm not going to read it inside, but he says, but then how does it work Shema Yigashena? If he's really a buyer, then it's davar shelo ba'al olam. We're back to square one. So they say no. Since it's just a rabbinic takana, as we say, an ordinance they instituted, from Ikar Hadin, as we say, the basic law is that she can actually remove the lien. But the rabbi said, as long as you're married, don't. So it's kind of put on hold. It's like she takes the vow and theoretically it should work because it should remove the lien. But we're going to temporarily keep the lien on because we're going to treat the husband as a buyer until such point as divorce. At divorce, the lien, right, basically that strength they gave him is removed. And then it reverts back to what should have happened at that time, which is the vow should have worked. So basically you end up with this combo, okay, where it's not going to actually work when, again, there's two ways of understanding. Either it could work immediately, but if you want to argue against me, I'll give you another reason. Is what Rabbi Yochanan and Nuri said. Or everybody agrees that the rabbis gave him strength. But theoretically, by the letter of the law, it should have worked, her vow, immediately. But the rabbis pushed it off that it's only going to work, be effective when they get divorced. Okay, and that's the answer we give in the end, which is funny because in the end, Rabbi Yochanan and Nuri's thing about divorce is not really the main thing. It's really all about the way we understand it, the shibud of Rava. Okay, the Rava says you can override the shibud by doing hekdesh, or in our case, we're going to say that's synonymous with vows. And a vow can basically override the lien, but maybe it'll stay temporarily while they're married, and it'll kick in when they get divorced. And that's how he understands Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri's position, which then makes it not a case at all of davar shelo ba'al olam, because it's really in her control to do it right then and there, even if, technically speaking, it's going to be pushed off till she's divorced. Okay, so again, the structure of our Gemara, what we did so far, we brought Rav Huna brought Rabbi Yehoshua to resolve this contradiction in the two rulings of Shmuel. One seemed to say you can sanctify something that wasn't in this world. One seems to say you can't, or I should say you take a vow, but which we're equating with sanctification. And he answered, it's really on something that's in this world, her hands. We said that still didn't work because it's still at some future point. The rabbis tried to compare it to other cases that work, except for Rabbi Yirmiyah, who said, no, it really doesn't work. And if you're going to compare it to this case that doesn't work. But every time somebody suggested something, we basically rejected it and said, that's not a good comparison. It's not really the same. And in the end, basically said divorce is different because she's got zero control over it. And we don't know if it's going to happen. In the end, Rav Ashi brings a different answer that it has to do with this law of Rava. And that's why it works. And theoretically, it would even work immediately. But, right, either in addition, right, if you disagree with that, well, because of the rabbi strengthened the position of the husband, or the rabbis definitely strengthened the position of the husband, and that's why it all gets pushed off till the time of divorce. But it really is davar shabal olam right now, theoretically by the letter of the law. New Mishnah. And this is much, much simpler than what we did so far. In today's daf, nadra ishto v'savor shenadra bito. Here we have a husband who makes a mistake when he nullifies the vow. It never says nullifies in the Mishnah, but it's obvious that we're talking about a man who nullified the neder. It only comes up at the very last word. But the point is, he nullified the vow, thinking it was his wife, it was his daughter who did it, but it turned out it was his wife. Now, the man has capability to nullify his wife or his daughter, so it doesn't matter. So he thought it was his daughter. He nullified it thinking it was his daughter's vow, and it turned out it was his wife. Or or the reverse case. Nazir, or he was confused about what she vowed. He thought she vowed to become a nazir. But he thought that she was forbidding something to herself, like a korban, right? That's the language of a regular vow. Or the reverse. She forbade some food or some item to her, and he thought that she was becoming a nazir. Nadrami te'enim, she vowed from figs. It sounds like a bit of a game of broken telephone, right? He gets word that the woman vowed about this, but somebody got it all wrong. So whether it was figs and it was really grapes, or the reverse, nadramin anavim, or it was figs, but he thought it was grapes, or nadramin anavim, v'savorcha nadramin te'enim, or the reverse. When he finds out his mistake, that he was wrong about the person, he was wrong about what they vowed about, he was wrong about what type of vow they made, was it nazir, was it korban, or what food did she forbid, he has to redo the hafara, he has to do it again. To which the Gemara starts off with a question, which will end here. And yes, b'yom shamoa, in other words, there's 2 days he hears. The first is when he heard she vowed, that's when he nullified it. That's why I said the Mishnah doesn't talk about 2 nullifications, but it's obvious that there were 2 nullifications from the last word. So at the first stage, he nullifies it on the day he hears, but then he hears later, on some other day, it could be that he was wrong about the vow and it was someone else, it was something else, etc. Then he has to re-nullify the vow. To which the Gemara says, and we'll stop right here, but where do we get this? And they're really talking about the first halacha. He has to know exactly whose vow he's nullifying. Where do you get it from? Because it says in the pasuk, ki heini avia ota, when her father restrains her, that's basically right, if he disagrees with her vow and restrains her from taking this vow, yani ota, it says her, which seems to be specifically, right? It could have just said, im yani avia, which means he basically restrains, obviously he restrains her. The word ota must mean specifically her. And then we're going to say, but we see in another case, and they're going to get totally off tangent, and you can read Shuli Mishkan all about laws of kriya, of tearing for mourning. Her article this week is all about kriya, which comes up in tomorrow's daf. We're going to say by kriya, if you tear kriya for the wrong person, it's not going to be the same, even though there's a verse that seems to indicate specifically you have to know who you're tearing for, and what if you don't, and we'll talk about that tomorrow. So that's going to be our question. In other words, they're making an assumption from the Mishnah and then questioning, are you getting it from the word ota? If so, why in kriya do we not also darshan a word that we're going to see? Doesn't actually come from the Torah. Okay, there is no kriya in the Torah, but we'll see where it comes from tomorrow, and from there we will pick up. Wishing everyone a great day, and don't forget to register for the siyum.